Once you've looked into the face of fear, you can't look back.
Resident Evil 5.
Welcome back to Retro Rebound. In today's video, spoopy season continues with the least spoopy game of all time, Resident Evil 5. And while it's not spooky, it is my favorite co-op game ever made. I love this game so much, and I cannot wait to share my enthusiasm with all of you because I have such a soft spot for this game. I'm going to explain why, because yes, as the title says in this video, I did give Resident Evil 5 a second chance. It's not really a second chance, it's like an 8 millionth chance, but we got to play to the algorithm to some extent here. But I wanted to try it again here in 2022 as we're in the month of October. Last October, we played Resident Evil 4 for the first time ever. We're going to go ahead and return to that once the Resident Evil 4 remake comes back around, so fret not if you're looking for more of that. It is on the way. Maybe we'll check out, I don't know, one more Resident Evil game down the stretch. Is that something you want to see? Let me know. But hey, we also have trash. If you want to see this too, let me know. We got so much to go over. But over time, I've recognized that Resident Evil is one of my favorite gaming franchises. I just played it so out of order. My first one was this game, Resident Evil 5. I knew nothing about the storyline, but I loved it. And then I went into 6 and I went, well, this is odd, but I kind of dig it. And then I went back and I understood where some people were coming from, but still to this day, Resident Evil 5 is my favorite Resi Evil game, and I thought now with it being October and the new expansion coming out for Village soon, that it's a great time to talk about Resident Evil. So let's kick it back with a game that has nothing to do with horror at all. That's Resident Evil 5. So ladies and gentlemen, if you're new here and you're into reviews, retrospective content, nostalgia, all that good stuff, consider subscribing. We're happy to have you here. Let's start off with the complete inbox experience. You know, we might have to call an audible on the play here. Here's my phone. You cannot read that. There is no way that you can read that text there, that red text. That's a lot, and I can barely read it. So, got my phone here. You like the case here, by the way? Yeah, my Battle Network fans. Shout out to all of you. Anyway, we're going to read the back close up. This is something I want to do with the channel anyway at some point in time, so when we have better equipment. For now, we'll deal with my phone. You don't have to face fear alone. The world has learned the meaning of terror. A decade after the events of Raccoon City, the evil Umbrella Corporation has been destroyed, but the effects of its horrific creations still linger, gripped in the fear of another biological incident. World governments formed the Bioterrorism Security Assessment Alliance, determined to stem the spread of the biological attacks. Now, Chris Redfield has been sent to Africa to investigate reports of a new, more dangerous outbreak. Joined by his new partner, Sheva Alomar, both must work together to discover what really is happening here and stop whoever is continuing Umbrella's evil legacy. Gee, I wonder who that is. Okay, now we can go back to our normal above-head camera. For the first time ever, join forces with friends as you control Chris Redfield or Sheva Alomar and fight fear together. Then it also says intense visuals so real, you won't be able to forget them. Powerful lighting effects create tension in both harsh sunlight and extreme darkness. This was I like to call it a 360-ass 360 game. Remember when, you know, those older 360 titles had almost a film grain to them? Everyone looked a little rugged. That was this game in a nutshell on a visual front. Let's take a look at the manual, though, and the complete box experience, because it is fuego. So here we go, cracking it open. You'll see that it's kind of got this really picture-in-picture presentation that I can always appreciate. So here it's going through the prologue. You see a hooded figure who's a key story component. You see Chris, Sheva. This is just going through the introduction of the game in 2009 when the game came out in Africa. Continuing on, it goes through all the characters, Chris, Sheva. But what I got a kick out of was here. It almost looks like they had a character limit on what they could fit here, because you'll notice everything is properly spaced. Like, you ready, partner? Trust me, I may not be as big as you, but I can certainly hold my own. And then here it says, we have to do this for fallen brothers. It's just all one clump of words. But let's keep flipping through here. I liked how there were pictures for each of the actions you do, so it kind of reflects what's going to happen when you press the button. Good for learning the game if it's your first video game ever. Not a lot of people think of that, but it is a thing that happens indeed. Just some menu stuff, saving your games. Of course, you know me. I love here, like, the little attention to detail. Game over, and then you see Wesker here on the right side. I like that stuff. That always rocks well with me here. They talk about cooperative play a lot because this is the first Resident Evil game where you could do online co-op, play with a friend, go through the whole story together. There's actions because there's going to be co-op actions, and how you interact with the world is a little different compared to your typical Resident Evil experience. They added a quick turning in this game. I believe that was already in Resident Evil 4, but again, I only played that game once. Don't get too upset with me, but I want to say it was already in there. The knife attack is here. Here's the cooperative actions that I was talking about. I always love the inventory management. Speaking of which, right here, item management in Resident Evil 5. I don't know, it was almost like a satisfying puzzle putting everything together that you'd carry on your mission, and then some hints. But also what I liked here was a little bit of history on everything that's happened in previous Resident Evil games. So you have some context like I needed, because this was my first one, on who the heck Jill Valentine is. And then there's a promotion for Dark Void. There's also hold on, we missed a page. There's a promotion here for, Bionic Commando, which I'm pretty sure that game reviewed really bad. But that's it. That's the manual. And you have Resident Evil Degeneration here on the back, which I also think was apparently really bad. But that's what comes in a complete in-box copy of Resident Evil 5. I picked the 360 here just because this is what I picked up originally when I first got my 360, not when it first came out. Because this was one of the first games I got with my 360 alongside Call of Duty World at War. So it does hold a very special place in my heart. It was actually this, World at War, and I forgot one, Mass Effect. What a great trifecta to start off a new generation with in my case. So now, let's talk about Resident Evil 5 and why this game just still rules. Many view it as a betrayal to the Resident Evil formula. It's not scary at all. One thing I learned through playing Resident Evil 4 for the first time last year is, oh, they really walked the line perfectly between tension and horror and action. It just feels like the game had a beautiful pace to it. There isn't really that elegance here in Resident Evil 5. It's not balls to the wall quite like Resident Evil 6, but it definitely ditches some of the conventions this series was known for. This was a problem with the franchise until Resident Evil 7 rolled around and we learned, oh yeah, survival horror creeps. That's what this was about, but now it's a first-person franchise, although this new update coming in Resident Evil Village will change some of that. But I digress. This was viewed as a betrayal to the core formula. So, of course, you have to understand, from my perspective coming in, I didn't know what Resident Evil was. I wasn't familiar with it. It was my first time playing it, so this is how I knew it. Oh, it's a co-op game with a really cool biochemical element and this corporation called Umbrella that seems to be pioneering all of the disaster in this world. It's very post-apocalyptic focus, which as a Fallout fan, just anything with the world ending seems to tickle my fancy. And overall, I just was grabbed by the game. But that aside, I do want to talk about why I think it's one of the best co-op games ever. I find it fascinating because at its core, Resident Evil 5 wasn't really supposed to go down like this. In the first trailer in 2007, it did not include Sheva. Sheva was added later into the game, and you can kind of tell by her story, by her arc, by her, one-time appearance in the entire series. Sheva wasn't a big part of the plans here, but she's your partner throughout all of this. But that doesn't matter because it's just a conduit for the player, your friend, to step in. I think it's because of the boss fights, though. The boss fights in Resident Evil 5 rock, in my opinion, but they rock because I've done them so many times that I know how to get around them. These are boss fights like Irving, who turns into this big sea monster. This is one that I'd say historically people go to and think, oh my god, what a pain in the butt that was. For me, as someone who's gone through this a bunch of times, I really got into it. I liked the challenge. I also really dug things like the incinerator boss fight where you're fighting this mutated Ouroboros creature and you have to lock them in the incinerator chambers. You have to lure them in and then quickly zip around. That's where I feel this game was at its best, with that light tension. Also kind of in the swamps where you're running around in the water and you got to get up to high ground. If you don't get up quick, that alligator's going to get you. It's going to one-tap you, and that's it. To me, that exploration, that danger, was a lot of fun with a friend alongside you. And I loved all the locales you'd go to. You start off in this small village and you end up in a lab, and it all kind of felt natural as you played through the game. I don't try to overthink Resident Evil 5 because when you do, I think it just starts to hurt the game a little bit, and that's fair because it's flawed. But I'm talking about things such as its story, which we'll get into. But going back, man, just going through some of these levels, it was so fun because there are so many different alleys and avenues that you can use to maneuver and explore. And with the co-op actions, there's new verticality in the game. And of course, with that, there are new collectibles like the mirrors that you can shoot hanging around in different parts of the level. This is where I got my achievement hunting bug. So again, there's a lot of nostalgia in this retrospective, more than usual, of course, because for me, like I didn't know what achievements were, and I hop into the 360 4 years after it had come out, and I'm playing Resident Evil 5 here, and I'm loving watching the gamer score rack up. And so I remember the rotten egg glitch. I don't know how many of you used that, but you'd farm rotten eggs and they gave you the most amount of money, so you'd sell them instead of replaying the game a million times, which I ended up doing anyways. I would upgrade all of my weapons by using the online co-op duping glitch and getting a ton of rotten eggs, throwing them up onto the storefront and getting all the money to buy everything I wanted. But there were, more frustrating achievements like, oh my God, the deflecting of a projectile with your knife. You had to time that perfectly. I think that solely existed for achievement and trophy hunters because I cannot wrap my head around why this mechanic exists, because the knife is so janky in Resident Evil 5. You're just sitting there swiping. It's weak too. And you're telling me I got to pull this thing out to deflect projectiles? It's 100% there just for that reason. I remember when I was in middle school, going into high school when I played this, that was a tough one to get. I spent a lot of time just hoping to hit a deflect because the enemies that were shooting at you, I think it's as early as Act 2, they would do a ton of damage if that crossbow bolt hit. So you die, reload, and when you were doing it with a friend, we kept cycling friends in and out, and so we kept trying to deflect, and I was the last one to get it, but I finally did get it. But yeah, this was the game that gave birth to that achievement hunting bug. It gave birth to that love of cooperative play because this is my first time with Xbox Live, so I was experiencing online Call of Duty for the first time. I was experiencing Xbox Live Party Chat for the first time. This game brought me together with friends. Everyone in my group had Resident Evil 5, so we were all just swapping around, replaying the game together, just constantly progressing or reprogressing. It didn't matter. It was a ton of fun. But I want to roll it back because I'm kind of all over the place with this video, and I like that it's messy because that's kind of fitting. This game is messy. I want to talk a little bit about the levels. One level I loved was the lab because it was such a shift, right? It was such a shift in tone and sound. It's quiet now because you have the lickers. The lickers are crawling around, and it's like you see one and go, no one move. Everyone be quiet. And if you do move, oh, they are a mighty terrifying foe. One of the creepier parts of the game, because as you're approaching the lab, you see the claw marks on the wall, you see the blood on the ground, and the game's bloody in general, but you go, okay, something's wrong here. Something's about to pop off here. You get that feeling. It's very rare the game dips into that feeling, but that's one of the standout moments where the tension is real. Otherwise, they crank the action up to 5,000, like when you're driving through the mountainous areas and you're in a back of a turret on a vehicle shooting this gargantuan creature, and when you shoot him, his head's like it's just a ridiculous video game from top to bottom. I think nothing solidifies that more than the corny moments like, of course, famously, Chris Redfield cementing his legacy by punching the boulder in the last level of the game. I don't know who came up with this, but that corniness worked so well for me. Because there were elements that we'll get into, like with Jill Valentine, that had me take the game seriously. But punching a boulder out, or Wesker throwing his glasses at Chris, and it's in slow motion. He's like, whoa! I just got a kick out of that stuff, man. So there's a lot of corny elements. And to me, that says the game's self-aware. I know it was a shift in tone big time for the Resident Evil culture. Don't get me wrong, that doesn't make it okay. But at least they were aware with what they were doing, with scenes that were intentionally done quite like that. Let's talk a bit about Jill Valentine. So the big question going into the game is she dead? You see a flashback from 2006, And there's Jill protecting Chris as presumably her and Wesker die, but she sacrificed herself. So yes, finally, Wesker's dead. You see this hooded figure all over the game. Yeah, surprise, surprise, it's Jill Valentine. This brings up the game section that will give you carpal tunnel if you do not have it already. The QTEs in this game are still bad. And when you had to pull the mind control device off of Jill, I get what they were trying to go for, synchronizing the gameplay with the story. Like, it's really rooted in there, and that's why she's acting this way. Like, this doesn't just fall out. This is deep within her. So as you're continuing to try to rip this mind control device out of her, you are going to mash that button over and over and over and over and over and over, minutes on end. It is ridiculous, and your arm will be sore. It did release in that era where people thought QTEs were cool and fun. And I don't mind the occasional QTE, but the mashing like this, no. That was bad. So yeah, I think of that when I think of Jill. But what I also think of more often than not, on a positive note, is the Lost in Nightmares DLC. Now, I didn't play that when the game first came out. I just kept replaying the main game over and over. But eventually, as we all know, thanks to the famous GameStop series, GameStop Roulette here on the channel, ladies and gentlemen, I traded the game in. Yes, I traded in one of my favorite games of all time and my favorite co-op game. Yeah, desperation, right? We do crazy things. But when I picked it back up on PS3, I picked it up with another friend who had not played Resident Evil 5. And I said, hey, let's get the gold edition. So the gold edition comes with all the DLC. And that is, of course, all the costumes you could wear, the ridiculous ones at that. But also, it would have Lost in Nightmares. So remember what I said about Jill Valentine in 2006 and dying? But you go to this manor, and you're playing as Jill. This is more of the traditional Resident Evil. It is actually creepy. I thought this was a kind of scary DLC, but it's only 1 hour. It's only 1 hour. And I remember finishing it and going, that was so good. I wish there was more. But it's just a retelling of the cutscene you had at the beginning of the game. And it gives you an outlet to those who are mourning with Resident Evil 5. Like, oh, hey, at least they still remember something about our survival horror roots. So I really like this DLC, though. It's up there easily in my top 10 for sure. Speaking of Jill dying and Wesker's a hilarious villain, isn't he? You know, I like how this game actually manages to have some really big moments in the Resident Evil franchise. Like when you find this flower that actually turns out it's the reason why all of these biochemical issues are ongoing and how Umbrella created the progenitor disease. Like it drops a megaton on you in the midst of all this chaos. And then you have this corny villain, Wesker, who's like, only those with superior DNA, or 7 minutes is all I can spare to play with you. Like this really cornball of a villain. I don't know, man. I just love how it bounces back and forth between the two. I can't get enough of it. It's a really fun co-op game. And it's not just available here only on 360. It's not just the gold edition. You can get it on current consoles. It'll come with all the DLC. I still recommend it. Does it have some of the jankiness of Resident Evils of those days where you can't move and shoot at the same time? Yes. Is it sometimes hard to get that red dot aim on that one collectible floating way in the background? Yes. Or of course those Ouroboros that you have to take down. Yes, it can be very difficult. It's hard to fight through. Are the QTEs annoying? Absolutely. Are some of the bosses going to make you want to pull your hair out? Of course. But amidst all those flaws, I find greatness. I wouldn't even call it a hidden gem. Call me someone in denial, but I really love Resident Evil 5, and this is why. So, ladies and gentlemen, I leave it in your hands now. What do you think of Resident Evil 5? Do you love it as much as I do? Please, fire away down below. I'm looking forward to your thoughts. And let me know if you want me to torture myself. I'm open to it. So with that, take great care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next Retro Rebound. Peace out.